Hello, I am Barton, and this is the introduction to the Focke-Wulf 190. The model I am flying right now is the Focke-Wulf 190A5. In this video, we will cover taxiing, taking off, and landing in this aircraft. The gigantic radial engine blocks a lot of your forward visibility, so you will have to snake down the taxiways to make sure you don't run into anybody. And in this, you'll find that it is very difficult to get the aircraft to turn to the right. It becomes far more responsive above 10 kilometers an hour, up towards 20, and will almost always require full rudder and a little bit of brake to get it to turn in that direction. It will be noted that the aircraft is far more likely, or far more willing, to turn left, and almost never requires full left rudder to do so. For takeoff, we will keep our flaps retracted, and we will lock the tail wheel by pulling full back on the stick. This will keep us from swaying around the runway during takeoff due to the torque effect of the engine. However, around 120 kilometers an hour, you're going to want to release back pressure on the stick and allow the tail to lift and the aircraft to level out. If you maintain back pressure too long through 140 kilometers to 150 kilometers an hour, the aircraft will lift off prematurely, stall, and cartwheel down the runway, which will not be very pleasant. Once you've leveled the aircraft off and gotten the tail wheel up, you want to wait until the aircraft accelerates through 200 kilometers an hour and then slowly add back pressure, lifting the nose up and lifting off the ground. You maintain a slight climb through 300 kilometers an hour, and the aircraft will be completely stable. Even with the tail wheel locked, the aircraft requires a slight amount of right rudder to stay straight. There's 200. Slowly pull back, lift it off, 250 kilometers an hour, gear comes up, .300 kilometers an hour, we're free. And that is taxiing and taking off in the Focke-Wulf 190. For landing, I will only be covering a brake landing, as that is what we use almost exclusively in Ghost Skies. And all other approaches will use the same approach, but just in a much longer angle or distance. Brake landing is best done at about 250 meters off the ground and around 350 kilometers an hour. Once you cross the threshold, you're going to knife edge the plane in the opposite direction of the runway, and not pull all the way back on the stick, but pull into a sharp turn while bringing the throttle to idle. As airspeed bleeds through 300 kilometers an hour, you're going to drop your flaps in your gear, and then come back up onto the throttle. You want to maintain between 230 and 250 kilometers an hour for your downwind and base. It's below this airspeed, the aircraft tends to want to fall out of the sky. You're going to have to use quite a bit of power turning final to keep your airspeed up. You're going to want to trade altitude a little bit. Your approach is going to be fairly steep. However, this angle is not going to be continued all the way through to touchdown. You're going to flare at about 20 meters off the deck and drop your throttle to idle. This is going to bleed your speed down to right around 150 kilometers an hour and provide a nice, easy touchdown and smooth transition into the brakes. Again, keeping your stick full rear, engages the tail wheel lock mechanism, and make sure that you don't go veering off all over the place. And that is bringing the aircraft to the ground. The most important part is the flare. If the flare is done too late, it will result in a bounce. The worst coming mid-bounce, or mid-flare. If you're in the middle of your flare when you touch the ground, and the flare hasn't fully developed yet, it'll result in a heavy bounce that can, if not countered properly, become out of control and result, if pursued, in the destruction of the aircraft. If you land, or if you flare too early, you can bleed all of your airspeed while you're still in the air, and if you get down below 150 kilometers an hour without touching the ground, eventually one of your wings will drop and you'll cartwheel across the runway,